Welcome back. As many of you already know, Sony just announced their latest flagship smartphone, the Xperia 1 Mark III. And to no one's surprise, it didn't get much attention from my fellow YouTubers. And I think they missed a big story here, especially with the cameras. Let's dive in. So last year I made a similar video about the Xperia 1 Mark II and how that camera system was very different from the competition. And I'm happy to say that it seems like Sony's doubled down on what makes Xperia different. And this year's we got a lot to talk about, so let's cover my three main points. If you saw those videos, you'll remember that I talked about manual versus auto, how Sony's cameras focus on the manual experience while the competition focuses on automatic. And Sony does this, with the Photo Pro and Cinema Pro apps that give you manual control, all the way to the two-stage shutter button that I still love using. It's an experience that's very close to using a real dedicated camera. And yes, many of their smartphones do have manual modes like Samsung's Pro mode, but it's not the same thing. And I've been testing the S21 Ultra's Pro mode, and I've got a lot to talk about in a future video. And on the topic of manual control, Sony likes to focus on one key area, which is autofocus. The Xperia 1 Mark II was already impressive, but most of its autofocus features were limited to the main 24mm lens. If you switched it to the ultra-wide and especially the 70mm, you lost most of that speed. We finally have the same level of autofocus performance that we would expect from a Sony Alpha camera, with the introduction of real-time tracking. This is a big deal. The ability to touch on a subject, track it real time through the frame, at just crazy speeds, multiple times a second, is awesome for a smartphone. AF tracking is one of my favorite features of Sony cameras. It's both easy to use and very powerful, and it really puts the Xperia on a different level. Now what I find most impressive is that this control is not limited to just one or two sensors. It's on all four focal lengths on the rear camera, even the new 105mm telephoto. Now let's talk about that breakthrough telephoto lens Sony made. It's a lens setup that we've never seen previously on any smartphone. Recently I had a poll on what camera features you wanted to see from the new Sony flagship, and by far the number one was a far-reaching telephoto. And 105mm is not quite as far as what we'd get from like a Samsung 10x zoom, but it's a great start. Unfortunately we didn't get number 2 or number 3 here, but I guess Sony had to save something for Mark IV. This telephoto lens breaks one of the biggest barriers in smartphone photography today, which is a variable zoom. A lens that can optically zoom at different focal lengths is very common in the dedicated camera market, but it's very difficult to pull off in the tight space that you have in a smartphone. And the solution that smartphone companies use now is just to add multiple telephoto lenses. Just look at Samsung with 3x and 10x on the S21 Ultra. This approach is not ideal, and Sony's way seems smarter. Now to be clear, Sony's telephoto can't optically zoom. It can only be in one of two positions, but it sets the perfect foundation to do that in the future. So similar to what I said last year, it seems Sony is leading the smartphone race with hardware and plans to catch up later on the software front. I believe this design is going to have a big impact on the industry. And I think Apple is honestly waiting for something like this before adding longer zooms to their cameras. Their flagship right now can only go to about 65mm optically. So what do you think? Based on my last poll, it seems many of you are impressed with the Xperia 1 Mark III. If you think Sony should lend me the phone before release, help me out and leave a comment below. I think if I can show some demand, they might start responding to my emails. I have many more videos coming on the Xperia 1 Mark III, so make sure to subscribe and like this video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.